Yesterday, California officials sued President Trump to roll back the administration's National Guard deployment. They argue President Trump overstepped the state's sovereignty. U.S. officials say the troops were deployed to protect federal property and personnel, but the lawsuit states there were no conditions to warrant the takeover.
Joining us again this morning, Chief Legal Analyst Khalif Rhodes. Khalif, let's just start at the beginning. When it comes to the powers that the president has to deploy troops, do they have to check in with the state first? Can the president do what he wants? I mean, that's kind of the argument at the top here between the governor and the president.
Does he have to check in with the states? I mean, that's an excellent lead in to a curveball question. I don't think the president of the United States has to check in with any governor. He's the top executive of the country, obviously the leader of the free world. But we do have rules, and specifically when you're talking about the National Guard, my brother's a member of the National Guard. He's a major going up for lieutenant colonel. And so because of that, I'm pretty intimately familiar with that. The National Guardsmen serve at the pleasure and the discretion of the governor of the state that they are in. And so the first answer, I think, is yes. You would need to make sure that the governor is requesting this. And then if the governor is asking for it, like I would say when Rodney King back in 1992, it happened. They asked Bush for him. Bush sent them out there to California. That's typically how that goes. However, and that's why I say it's a curveball, they don't have to ask if they believe that it's an insurrection, if they believe this is a rebellion, if they believe that it's a rebellion against the United States, then the president may absorb and take over the National Guard and send National Guard troops there. And that's what's happened in this situation. I just think, as the Governor Newsom said, it may have been a little bit too fast. You need to be able to prove that there is some type of insurrection or rebellion, and I'm not sure if President Trump or the Trump administration will be able to do that, and that's where you'll have a problem. That's why they filed the lawsuit. When you talk about states' rights versus federal rights, this is an argument that we see a number of times. Typically, the Republican Party is the party that's saying that rights need to go back to the states. However, this is a situation where we're saying, no, we got this. The federal government can handle it. Why? Because this is a Democratic governor, and they are butting heads on a number of issues. And so there will be no collaboration or no working together. This is one where I will tell you what to do, and then you're going to have to sue me to stop me from doing it.
I want to put this into context, too. The last time that a president deployed the National Guard against the will of the governor was 1965 in Selma. To put that into context there, what's the rights of the National Guard? Because they can't make arrests necessarily. So how does that work out? What rights did they have versus the police there? Who calls the shots?
Can't make arrests, but can detain, can assist law enforcement in detaining. And so it'll be crowd management. It will be, brute force, show of strength. I mean, it will go against everything that we've kind of learned since the 70s and the 80s, where those type of methods with policing protests don't work. That show of force and show of strength goes against the de-escalation model and the collaborative working model, because remember, folks do have a constitutional right to protest. That protest, when it turns violent, there is no constitutional right to that. That's when law enforcement needs to step in. But if it starts from the very beginning as confrontational, as this show of force that we're going to show you that you don't belong here, then what you will do is now escalate this situation. And all of the studies since the 70s and the 80s show that that type of method doesn't work. And so, as the governor said and other folks there are saying, and as LAPD has said, we understand and recognize how to manage these situations. And when you're bringing in this additional force, specifically this military force, it's not going to go the way that you want it to go in terms of stopping this process from occurring, because at some point folks are going to continue to push back. And that's what we're having now.
Not only is the Los Angeles mayor saying stop the raids there, but even locally, we had a smaller protest yesterday in Charlotte. We're looking at more around our area this coming weekend. They're also saying stop the raids. So even when we start to bring this here locally, is what the president is doing with these raids and arrests, is that illegal? Is he within his power to do that? Or is this just it's making immigrants feel unsafe? We should stop because it's making them feel unsafe. Where's the legal line here?
100% legal. I mean, the federal government has control we're talking about states and federal rights. Again, the states have no control over immigration, and so the federal government has control over immigration. Through ICE, the president is given the directive to go out and figure out how to get these mandate numbers that he's attempting to get. I think the biggest push lately is when I read the article about Stephen Miller. He brought most of these ICE officials to D.C. and said, look, our numbers are not where we want them them to be. We need you to figure out ways to go out and find folks. He was quoted as saying that even if you go out today in D.C. to Home Depot and places like that, kind of, stereotyping, that I'm sure you can find folks that are there that are labor-ready working people that you can arrest and detain and put in a position where they can be deported. So they're already getting a mandate from the federal government on how to go. To your question, there's nothing illegal about going out there and doing what ICE is supposed to do. It's the other portion of when folks protest for it. What are their rights? First Amendment rights, being able to speak and go against those things from happening, and being able to quell and stop that type of speech. That's what we are saying, is it legal or illegal? The ICE portion is secondary. The being able to protest and fight against it is something that now we're seeing is, are you able to do that in a manner in which you're attempting to stop those folks from exercising their constitutional rights? And these are American citizens typically that are out there doing that. And so in media, so you're also getting that pushback. Well, we're saying we have a First Amendment right to be able to the press that's also being infringed.
Khalif, if I'm one of the people out there protesting, I'm a good actor, right? But say somebody to the right of me, they throw a bottle towards the police line, or they start inciting violence. What do I do? Because I'm within my right. I'm practicing my First Amendment rights, but the person next to me, now, am I lumped in with what's going on?
Most definitely. And in that situation, you'll be lumped in. Even if you are a good actor and you're legitimately where you're supposed to be, once it turns violent, that's the time for you to not be in that space, because law enforcement is going to try to figure out how to manage the situation. And most of the time, manage it is to get everyone out of the way, to get everyone out of there regardless. And they're not trying to figure out, well, I didn't see you throw a bottle, I saw you throw a bottle. They're trying to go home and be home to their family.
Right.
And so at the end of the day, and I want them to get home to their family. And so at the end, if they're trying to manage that crowd, they're not picking and choosing who the good and bad actors are. Normally that's taken care of later with some type of investigation. And so if they're not doing that right there on the scene, the best advice is to get out of there and come back the next day where the protest may be peaceful.
Queen City News Plus. Just search Queen City News on your smart TV's app store.